I'm back. We're gonna do this Harry Potter thing again. I'm just waiting for Angie to come on and whoever else is joining for this event. We can't start reading until that happens. Yay! Got somebody. I don't know who that is, but it's somebody. No, I don't want to write a comment. Oh, now I have 3 people. Okay, so who's watching me? Aha! Nicole, hi. Angie. All of the waves, which means Manny's also here. Okay, so are we ready for chapters, well, at least chapter 3. I don't know if we're going to do chapter 4 or not. It's going to depend upon how my voice feels. Oh my goodness. Okay. All right. Oh my goodness, I got the whole family, the whole Cordero family. Hi guys. Oh wait, what did I not do last time? Hang on. Cause, oh, I don't know how to fix that. I have no idea. Apparently while I'm reading, yeah, it looks backwards or weird or something. I don't know. All right. We're just gonna leave it as is. Okay, so we left off with they'd gotten back from the zoo, the glass disappeared, you know, all that nonsense going on. And, you know, Harry wishing that he was a member of a different family. But sadly, he's not. Alright, so chapter 3 of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. The letters from no one. The escape of the Brazilian boa constrictor earned Harry his longest ever punishment. By the time he was allowed out of his cupboard again, the summer holidays had started, and Dudley had already broken his new video camera, crashed his remote control airplane, and, first time out on his racing bike, knocked down old Mrs. Figg as she crossed Privet Drive on her crutches. Harry was glad school was over, but there was no escaping Dudley's gang, who visited the house every single day. Piers, Dennis, Malcolm, and Gordon were all big and stupid. But as Dudley was the biggest and stupidest of the lot, he was the leader. The rest of them were all quite happy to join in Dudley's favorite sport, Harry hunting. This was why Harry spent as much time as possible out of the house, wandering around and thinking about the end of the holidays, where he would see a tiny ray of hope. When September came, he was going to be off to secondary school, and for the first time in his life, he wouldn't be with Dudley. Dudley had been accepted at Uncle Vernon's old private school, Smeltings. Such a terrible name for a school, in my opinion. All right. Piers Polkiss was going there too. Harry, on the other hand, was going to Stonewall High, the local public school. Dudley thought this was very funny. They stuff people's heads down the toilet the first day at Stonewall, he told Harry. Want to come upstairs and practice? No thanks, said Harry. The poor toilet's never had anything as horrible as your head down it. It might get sick. Then he ran, before Dudley could work out what he'd just said. One day in July, Aunt Petunia took Dudley to London to buy his Smeltings uniform, leaving Harry at Mrs. Figg's. Mrs. Figg wasn't as bad as usual. It turned out she'd broken her leg tripping over one of her cats, and she didn't seem quite as fond of them as before. She let Harry watch television and gave him a bit of chocolate cake that tasted as though she'd had it for several years. That evening, Dudley paraded around the living room for the family in his brand new uniform. Smelting's boys wore maroon tailcoats, orange knickerbockers, and flat straw hats called boaters. They also carried knobby sticks used for hitting each other while the teachers weren't looking. This was supposed to be good training for later in life. As he looked at Dudley in his knickerbockers, Uncle Vernon said gruffly that it was the proudest moment of his life. Aunt Petunia burst into tears and said she couldn't believe that her ickle Duddykins, he'd looked so handsome and grown up. Harry didn't trust himself to speak. He thought 2 of his ribs might already have cracked from trying not to laugh. There was a horrible smell in the kitchen the next morning when Harry went in for breakfast. It seemed to be coming from a large metal tub in the sink. He went to have a look. The tub was full of what looked like dirty rags swimming in gray water. "What's this?" he asked Aunt Petunia. Her lips tightened as they often did when he dared ask a question. "Your new school uniform," she said. Harry looked in the bowl again. "Oh, I didn't realize it had to be so wet." "Don't be stupid," snapped Aunt Petunia. "I'm dyeing some of Dudley's old things gray for you. It'll look just like everyone else's when I've finished." Harry seriously doubted this, but thought it best not to argue. He sat down at the table and tried not to think about how he was going to look on his first day at Stonewall High. Like he was wearing bits of old elephant skin, probably. Dudley and Uncle Vernon came in, both with wrinkled noses because of the smell from Harry's new uniform. Uncle Vernon opened his newspaper as usual, and Dudley banged his smelting stick, which he carried everywhere, on the table. They heard the click of the mail slot and the flop of letters on the doormat. "Get the mail, Dudley," said Uncle Vernon from behind his paper. "Make Harry get it." "Get the mail, Harry." "Make Dudley get it." "Poke him with your smelting stick, Dudley." Harry dodged the smelting stick and went to get the mail. 3 things lay on the doormat. A postcard from Uncle Vernon's sister Marge, who was vacationing in the Isle of Wight, a brown envelope that looked like a bill, and a letter for Harry. Harry picked it up and stared at it, his heart twinkling like a gigantic elastic band. No one, ever, in his whole life, had written to him. Who would? He had no friends, no other relatives. He didn't belong to the library, so he'd never even gotten rude notes asking for books back. Yet here it was, a letter, addressed so plainly there could be no mistake. Mr. H. Potter, The Cupboard Under the Stairs, No. 4 Privet Drive, Little Whinging, Surrey. The envelope was thick and heavy, made of a yellowish parchment, and the address was written in emerald green ink. There was no stamp. Turning the envelope over, his hand trembling, Harry saw a purple wax seal bearing a coat of arms. A lion, an eagle, a badger, and a snake surrounding the large letter H. "Hurry up, boy!" shouted Uncle Vernon from the kitchen. "What are you doing? Checking for letter bombs?" He chuckled at his own joke. Harry went back to the kitchen, still staring at his letter. He handed Uncle Vernon the bill, the postcard, sat down, and slowly began to open the yellow envelope. Uncle Vernon ripped open the bill, snorted in disgust, and flipped over the postcard. "Marge is ill," he informed Aunt Petunia. "Ate a funny whelk." "Dad!" said Dudley suddenly. "Dad, Harry's got something!" Harry was on the point of unfolding his letter, which was written on the same heavy parchment as the envelope, when it was jerked sharply out of his hands by Uncle Vernon. "That's mine," said Harry, snatching it back. "Who'd be writing to you?" sneered Uncle Vernon, shaking the letter open with one hand and glancing at it. His face went from red to green faster than a set of traffic lights. It didn't stop there. Within seconds, it was the grayish white of old porridge. "Petunia!" he gasped. Dudley tried to grab the letter to read it, but Uncle Vernon held it high out of reach. Aunt Petunia took it curiously and read the first line. For a moment, it looked as though she might faint. She clutched her throat. and made a choking noise. "Vernon! Oh my goodness, Vernon!" They stared at each other, seeming to have forgotten that Harry and Dudley were still in the room. Dudley wasn't used to being ignored. He gave his father a sharp tap on the head with his smelting sticks. "I want to read that letter," he said loudly. "I want to read it," said Harry furiously, "as it's mine." "Get out, both of you!" croaked Uncle Vernon, stuffing the letter back inside his envelope. Harry didn't move. "I want my letter!" he shouted. I don't know how to put this on YouTube. Can I take my Facebook video and share it to YouTube? Sorry, guys. I'm taking a chance to stop and read your comments. Hey, Ashley. I haven't seen you in forever. Okay. I'll figure out how to share it to YouTube and maybe cut out these bits. Alright, back to the story. "Let me see it!" demanded Dudley. "Ouch!" roared Uncle Vernon, and he took both Harry and Dudley by the scruffs of their necks and threw them into the hall, slamming the kitchen door behind them. Harry and Dudley promptly had a furious but silent fight over who would listen at the keyhole. Dudley won, so Harry, his glasses dangling from one ear, laid flat on his stomach to listen at the crack between the door and the floor. "Vernon," Aunt Petunia was saying in a quivering voice, "look at the address. How could they possibly know where he sleeps? You don't think they're watching the house?" "Watching? Spying? Might be following us?" muttered Uncle Vernon wildly. "What do we do, Vernon? Should we write back? Tell them we don't want—" Harry could see Uncle Vernon's shiny black shoes pacing up and down the kitchen. "No," he said firmly. "No, we'll ignore it. If they don't get an answer, yes, that's best. We won't do anything." "But I will not have one in the house, Petunia. Didn't we swear when we took him in we'd stamp out that dangerous nonsense?" That evening, when he got back from work, Uncle Vernon did something he'd never done before. He visited Harry in his cupboard. "Where's my letter?" said Harry, the moment Uncle Vernon had squeezed through the door. "Who's writing to me?" "No one. It was addressed to you by mistake," said Uncle Vernon shortly. "I have burned it." "It was not a mistake," said Harry angrily. "It had my cupboard on it." "Silence!" yelled Uncle Vernon. A couple of spiders fell from the ceiling. He took a few deep breaths and then forced his face into a smile. It looked quite painful. Yes, Harry, about this cupboard. Your aunt and I have been thinking, you're getting a bit big for it. We think might be nice if you moved into Dudley's second bedroom." "Why?" said Harry. "Don't ask questions," snapped his uncle. "Take this stuff upstairs, now." The Dursleys' house had 4 bedrooms. One for Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia. One for visitors, usually Uncle Vernon's sister Marge. One where Dudley slept, and one where Dudley kept all of the toys and things that didn't fit in his first bedroom. It only took Harry one trip upstairs to move everything he owned from the cupboard to this room. He sat down on the bed and stared around him. Nearly everything in here was broken. The month-old video camera was laying on top of a small, working tank Dudley had once driven into the neighbor's dog. In the corner was Dudley's first ever television set, which he'd put his foot through when his favorite program had been canceled. There was a large bird cage, which had once held a parrot that Dudley had swapped at school for a real air rifle, which had ended up on the shelf with the end all bent because Dudley had sat on it. Other shelves were full of books. They were the only thing in this room that looked as though they'd never been touched. From downstairs came the sound of Dudley bawling at his mother. "I don't want him in there! I need that room! Make him get out!" Harry sighed and stretched out on the bed. Yesterday, he'd have given anything to be up here. Today, he'd rather be back in his cupboard with that letter rather than up here without it. The next morning at breakfast, everyone was rather quiet. Dudley was in shock. He'd screamed, whacked his father with a smelting stick, been sick on purpose, kicked his mother, and thrown his tortoise through the greenhouse roof, and he still didn't have his room back. Harry was thinking about this time yesterday and bitterly wishing he'd opened the letter in the hall. Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia kept looking at each other darkly. When the mail arrived, Uncle Vernon, who seemed to be trying to be nice to Harry, made Dudley go and get it. They heard him banging things with his smelting stick all the way down the hall, and then he shouted, "There's another one! Mr. H. Potter, the smallest bedroom, 4 Privet Drive." With a strangled cry, Uncle Vernon leapt from his seat and ran down the hall, Harry right behind him. Uncle Vernon had to wrestle Dudley to the ground to get the letter from him, which was made difficult by the fact that Harry had grabbed Uncle Vernon around the neck from behind. After a minute of confused fighting, in which everyone got hit a lot by the smelting stick, Uncle Vernon straightened up, gasping for breath, with Harry's letter clutched in his hand. "Go to your cupboard! I mean your bedroom!" he wheezed at Harry. "Dudley! Go! Just go!" Harry walked round and round his new room. Someone knew he had moved out of his cupboard, and they seemed to know he hadn't received his first letter. Surely that meant they'd try again? This time he'd make sure they didn't fail. He had a plan. The repaired alarm clock rang at 6 o'clock the next morning. Harry turned it off quickly and dressed silently. He mustn't wake the Dursleys. He stole downstairs without turning on any of the lights. He was going to wait for the postman on the corner of Privet Drive and get the letters for number 4 first. His heart hammered as he crept down the hall towards the front door. "Ugh!" Harry leapt into the air. He'd trodden on something big and squishy on the doormat. Something alive! The lights clicked on upstairs, and to his horror, Harry realized that the big, squishy something had been his uncle's face. Uncle Vernon had been laying on the floor of the front door in a sleeping bag, clearly making sure that Harry didn't do exactly what he'd been trying to do. He shouted at Harry for about half an hour, and then told him to go and make a cup of tea. Harry shuffled miserably off into the kitchen, and by the time he got back, the mail had arrived, right into Uncle Vernon's lap. Harry could see 3 letters addressed in green ink. "I want," he began, but Uncle Vernon was tearing the letters into pieces before his eyes. Uncle Vernon didn't go to work that day. He stayed at home and nailed up the mail slot. "See," he explained to Aunt Petunia through a mouthful of nails, "they can't deliver them. They'll just have to give up." "I'm not sure that'll work, Vernon." "Oh, these people's minds work in strange ways, Petunia. They're not like you and me," said Uncle Vernon, trying to knock in a nail with a piece of fruitcake Aunt Petunia had just brought to him. Who the hell eats fruitcake? On Friday, no less than 12 letters arrived for Harry. As they couldn't go through the mail slot, they'd been pushed under the door, slotted through the sides, and a few even forced through the small window in the downstairs bedroom. Uncle Vernon stayed at home again. After burning all the letters, he got out a hammer and nails and boarded up the cracks around the front door and back doors so no one could go out. He hummed Tiptoe Through the Tulips as he worked and jumped at small noises. On Saturday, things began to get out of hand. 24 letters to Harry found their way into the house, rolled up and hidden inside each of the 24 eggs that their very confused milkman had handed Aunt Petunia through the living room window. While Uncle Vernon made furious telephone calls to the post office and the dairy trying to find someone to complain to, Aunt Petunia shredded the letters in her food processor. "Who on earth wants to talk to you this badly?" Dudley asked Harry in amazement. On Sunday morning, Uncle Vernon sat down at the breakfast table looking tired and rather ill, but happy. "No post on Sundays," he reminded them cheerfully as he spread marmalade on his newspapers. No damn letters today. Something came whizzing down the kitchen chimney as he spoke and caught him sharply on the back of the head. The next moment, 30 or 40 letters came pelting out of the fireplace like bullets. The Dursleys ducked, but Harry leapt into the air trying to catch one. Ouch! Ouch! Uncle Vernon seized Harry around the waist and threw him down the hall. When Aunt Petunia and Dudley had ran out with their faces over their arms, or with their arms over their faces, Uncle Vernon slamming the door shut. They could hear the letters still streaming into the room, bouncing off the walls and floors. That does it, said Uncle Vernon, trying to speak calmly, but pulling great tufts out of his mustache at the same time. I want you back in here in 5 minutes, ready to leave. We're going away. Just pack some clothes. No arguments. He looked so dangerous with half his mustache missing that no one dared argue. 10 minutes later, they had wrenched their way through the boarded-up doors and were in the car, speeding towards the highway. Dudley was sniffing in the back seat. His father had hit him around the head for holding them up while he tried to pack his television, VCR, seriously a VCR, and computer into his sports bag. They drove. And they drove. Even Aunt Petunia didn't dare ask where they were going. Every now and then, Uncle Vernon would take a sharp turn and drive in the opposite direction for a while. Shake 'em off! Shake 'em off! He would mutter whenever he did this. They didn't stop to eat or drink all day. By nightfall, Dudley was howling. He'd never had such a bad day in his life. He was hungry. He'd missed 5 television programs he wanted to see, and he'd never gone so long without blowing up an alien on his computer. Uncle Vernon stopped at last outside a gloomy-looking hotel on the outskirts of a big city. Dudley and Harry shared a room with twin beds and damp, musty sheets. Dudley snored, but Harry stayed awake, sitting on the windowsill, staring down at the lights of passing cars and wondering. The next morning, they ate stale cornflakes and cold tinned tomatoes on toast for breakfast. They had just finished when the owner of the hotel came over to their table. "Excuse me, is one of you Mr. H. Potter?" "Only I got about 100 of these in the front desk." She held up the letter so they could read the green ink addressed. "Mr. H. Potter, room 17, Railview Hotel, Cokeworth." Harry made a grab for the letter, but Uncle Vernon knocked his hand out of the way. The woman stared. "I'll take them," said Uncle Vernon, standing up quickly and following her from the dining room. "Wouldn't it be better to just go home, dear?" Aunt Petunia suggested timidly, hours later. But Uncle Vernon didn't seem to hear her. Exactly what he was looking for, none of them knew. He drove them into the middle of a forest, got out, and looked around. Shook his head, got back in the car, and off they went again. The same thing happened in the middle of a plowed field, halfway through a suspension bridge, and on top of a multi-level parking garage. "Daddy's gone mad, hasn't he?" Dudley asked Aunt Petunia dully late that afternoon. Uncle Vernon had parked up at the coast, locked them all inside the car, and disappeared. It started to rain. Great fat drops beat on the... Sorry, guys. I just was receiving a phone call. Hang on 1 second. Okay. I'm reading a book on Facebook. I can't answer your phone call. Alright, Kira, if you go back and read this, now you know what I was doing when I, declined your phone call. Sorry. Hey, water break! Am I still frozen? It doesn't look like I am. Am I still frozen? Somebody let me know. Am I still frozen? This doesn't count in your drinking game, Justin. People are over here blowing up my phone. I got somebody, oh, hey, we got new watchers. Okay. I got people ordering meals. I got people calling me because, you know, Easter's this weekend and we're planning food and stuff. Okay. Oh my goodness. Sorry, I had to get rid of the headache. All right. Where was I? Okay, Daddy's gone mad. All right. Every day, Justin. You can't get drunk like this every day. I'll read just about every day, though. I'm glad it's not frozen anymore. All right, I'm continuing on. So Uncle Vernon has been outside of the car. They've been locked inside it for an hour or so. It's raining. All right. Dudley sniveled. It's Monday, he told his mother. The great Umberto's on tonight. I want to stay somewhere with a television. Monday. This reminded Harry of something. If it was Monday, and you could usually count on Dudley to know the days of the week because of television, then tomorrow, Tuesday, was Harry's 11th birthday. Of course, his birthdays were never exactly fun. Last year, the Dursleys had given him a coat hanger and a pair of Uncle Vernon's old socks. Still, you weren't 11 every day. Why is Daddy mad? I'm not even gonna... Uncle Vernon was back, and he was smiling. He was also carrying a long, thin package and didn't answer Aunt Petunia when he asked what he'd bought. Found the perfect place, he said. Come on, everyone out! It was very cold outside the car. Uncle Vernon was pointing at what looked like a large rock way out at the sea. Perched on top of the rock was the most miserable-looking shack you could imagine. One thing was certain. There was no television in there. Storm forecast for tonight, said Uncle Vernon gleefully, clapping his hands together. And this gentleman's kindly agreed to lend us his boat. A toothless old man came ambling up to them, pointing, with a rather wicked grin, at an old rowboat bobbing in the iron-gray water below them. I've already got us some rations, said Uncle Vernon, so all aboard! It was freezing in the boat. Icy sea spray and rain crept down their necks, and a chilly wind whipped their faces. After what seemed like hours, they reached the rock, where Uncle Vernon, slipping and sliding, led the way to the broken-down house. The inside was horrible. It smelled strongly of seaweed, the wind whistled through the gaps in the wooden walls, and the fireplace was damp and empty. There were only 2 rooms. Uncle Vernon's rations turned out to be a bag of chips each and 4 bananas. He tried to start a fire with the empty chip bags, but they just smoked and shriveled up. Could do with some of those letters now, eh? He said cheerfully. He was in a very good mood. Obviously, he thought nobody stood a chance of reaching them here in a storm. To deliver mail. Harry privately agreed, though the thought didn't cheer him up at all. As night fell, the promised storm blew up around them. Spray from the high waves splattered the walls of the hut, and a fierce wind rattled the filthy windows. Aunt Petunia found a few moldy blankets in the second room and made up a bed for Dudley on the moth-eaten sofa. She and Uncle Vernon went off to the lumpy bed next door, and Harry was left to find the softest bit of floor he could and to curl up under the thinnest, most ragged blanket. The storm raged more and more ferociously as the night went on. Harry couldn't sleep. He shivered and turned over, trying to get comfortable, his stomach rumbling with hunger. Dudley's snores were drowned out by the low rolls of thunder that started near midnight. The lighted dial of Dudley's watch, which was dangling over the edge of the sofa on his fat wrist, told Harry he'd be 11 in 10 minutes' time. He lay and watched his birthday tick nearer, wondering if the Dursleys would remember it all, wondering where the letter writer was now. 5 minutes to go. Harry heard something creak outside. He hoped the roof wasn't going to fall in, although he might be warmer if it did. 4 minutes to go. Maybe the house in Privet Drive would be so full of letters when they got back that he'd be able to steal one somehow. 3 minutes to go. Was that the sea slapping hard on the rocks like that? And 2 minutes to go. What was that funny crunching noise? Was the rock crumbling into the sea? 1 minute to go and he'd be 11. 30 seconds. 20. 10. 9. Maybe he'd wake Dudley up just to annoy him. 3. 2. 1. Boom! The whole house, the whole shack, shivered, and Harry sat bolt upright, staring at the door. Someone was outside, knocking to come in. All right, I feel like we have to read chapter 4. We're now on to chapter 4. The Keeper of the Keys. You see the picture? Boom! They knocked again. Dudley jerked awake. "Where's the cannon?" he asked stupidly. There was a crash behind them, and Uncle Vernon came skidding into the room. He was holding a rifle in his hands. Now they knew what had been in that long, thin package he'd bought. "Who's there?" he shouted. "I warn you, I'm armed!" There was a pause. And then, smash! The door was hit with such force that it swung clean off its hinges and with a deafening crash landed flat on the floor. A giant of a man was standing in the doorway. His face was almost completely hidden by a long, shaggy mane of hair and a wild, tangled beard. But you could make out his eyes, glinting like black beetles under all of the hair. The giant squeezed his way into the hut, stooping so that his head was just brushing the ceiling. He bent down, picked up the door, and fitted it easily back into its frame. The noise of the storm outside dropped a little. He turned to look at all of them. "Couldn't make us a cup of tea, could ya? It's not been an easy journey." He strode over to the sofa where Dudley sat frozen with fear. "Budge up, you great lump," said the stranger. Dudley squeaked and ran to hide behind his mother, who was crouched, terrified, behind Uncle Vernon. "And here's Harry," said the giant. Harry looked up at the fierce, wild, shadowy face and saw that the beetle eyes were crinkled in a smile. "Last time I saw you, you was only a baby," said the giant. "You look a lot like your dad, but you've got your mum's eyes." Uncle Vernon made a funny, rasping noise. "I demand that you leave at once, sir. You are breaking and entering." "Oh, shut up, Dursley, you great prune," said the giant. He'd reached over the back of the sofa, jerked the gun out of Uncle Vernon's hand, bent it into a knot as easily as if it had been made out of rubber, and threw it into the corner of the room. Uncle Vernon made another funny noise like a mouse being trotted on. "Anyway, Harry," said the giant, turning his back on the Dursleys, "a very happy birthday to you. Got something for you here. I might have sat on it at some point, but it'll taste all right." From an inside pocket of his black overcoat, he pulled a slightly squashed box. Harry opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a large, sticky chocolate cake with "Happy Birthday, Harry" written on it with green icing. Harry looked up at the giant. He meant to say thank you, but the words got lost on the way to his mouth when he said instead, "Who are you?" The giant chuckled. true. I haven't introduced myself. Rubeus Hagrid, keeper of the keys and grounds at Hogwarts. He held out an enormous hand and shook Harry's whole arm. What was that about tea then, eh? He said, rubbing his hands together. I'd not say no to something stronger if you got it, mind. His eyes fell on the empty grate with the shriveled chip bags in it, and he snorted. He bent down over the fireplace. They couldn't see what he was doing, but when he drew back a second later, there was a roaring fire there. It filled the whole damp hut with flickering light, and Harry felt the warmth wash over him as though he'd sunk into a hot tub. The giant sat down on the sofa, which sagged under his weight, and began taking all sorts of things out of the pockets of his coat. A copper kettle, a squishy package of sausages, a poker, a teapot, several chip mugs, a bottle of some amber liquid that he took a swig from before he started making tea. Soon the hut was full of the sound and smell of sizzling sausage. Nobody said a thing while the giant was working. But as he slid the first 6 fat, juicy, slightly burnt sausages from the poker, Dudley fidgeted a little. Uncle Vernon said sharply, "Don't touch anything he gives you, Dudley." The giant chuckled darkly. "You great puddin' of a son don't need fattening any more, Dursley, don't worry." He passed the sausages to Harry, who was so hungry he had never tasted anything so wonderful, but he still couldn't take his eyes off the giant. Finally, as nobody seemed about to explain anything, he said, "I'm sorry, but I still don't really know who you are." The giant took a gulp of tea and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Call me Hagrid," he said. "Everybody does. And like I told you, I'm keeper of keys at Hogwarts. You'll know all about Hogwarts, of course." No," said Harry. Hagrid looked shocked. "Sorry," said Harry quickly. "Sorry?" barked Hagrid, turning to stare at the Dursleys, who shrunk back to the windows. "It's them who should be sorry. I knew you weren't getting your letters, but I never thought you wouldn't know about Hogwarts, for crying out loud. Didn't you never wonder where your parents learned it all?" "All what?" said Harry. "All what?" Hagrid thundered. "Now wait just 1 second." He'd leapt to his feet. In his anger, he seemed to fill the whole hut. The Dursleys were cowering against the wall. "Do you mean to tell me," he growled at the Dursleys, "that this boy knows nothing about anything?" Harry thought this was going a bit far. He'd been to school after all, and his marks weren't bad. "I know some things. I can, do math and stuff." Hagrid simply waved his hand and said, "About our world, I mean. Your world, my world, your parents' world." "What world?" Hagrid looked as if he was about to explode. "Dursley!" he boomed. Uncle Vernon had gone very pale, whispered something that sounded like Hagrid stared wildly at Harry. "You must know about your mom and dad. I mean, they're famous. You're famous." "What? My mom and dad weren't famous, were they?" You don't know. Hagrid ran his fingers through his hair, fixing Harry with a bewildered stare. "You don't know what you are?" he said finally. Uncle Vernon suddenly found his voice. "Stop!" he commanded. "Stop right there, sir. I forbid you to tell that boy anything." A braver man than Vernon Dursley would have quailed under the furious look Hagrid now gave him. And then Hagrid spoke. His every syllable trembled with rage. "You never told him. You never told him what was in that letter Dumbledore left for him. I was there. I saw Dumbledore leave it, Dursley, and you've kept it from him all these years." "Kept what from me?" said Harry eagerly. "Stop! I forbid you!" yelled Uncle Vernon in panic. Aunt Petunia gave a gasp of horror. "Go boil your heads, both of you," said Hagrid. "Harry, you're a wizard. There was silence inside the hut. Only the sea and the whistling wind could be heard. "I'm a what?" gasped Harry. "A wizard, of course," said Hagrid, sitting back down on the sofa, which groaned and sank even lower. "And a thumping good 'un, I'd say, once you've been trained up a bit. With a mum and dad like yours, what else would you be? And I reckon it's about time you read your letter." Harry stretched out his hand at last to take the yellowish envelope, addressed in emerald green to Mr. H. Potter, the floor, hut on the rocks, the sea. He pulled out the letter and read: Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Headmaster Albus Dumbledore, Order of Merlin, First Class, Grand Sorcerer, Chief Warlock, Supreme Mugwump, International Confederacy of Wizards. Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins on September 1st. We await your owl by no later than July 31st. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. Hang on one second. I'm getting text messages. I need to check them. One moment, guys. I'm sorry. I'll check when I'm done reading. I'm currently reading on Facebook. All right. Questions exploded inside Harry's head like fireworks, and he couldn't decide which to ask first. After a few minutes, he stammered, "What does it mean, they await my owl?" "Galloping Gorgons! That reminds me," said Hagrid, clapping his hand to his forehead with enough force to knock over a cart horse. And from yet another pocket inside his overcoat, he pulled an owl out of his coat. A real, live, rather ruffled-looking owl, a long quill and a roll of parchment. With his tongue between his teeth, he scribbled a note that Harry could read upside down. Dear Professor Dumbledore, given Harry his letter, taking him to buy his things tomorrow, weather's horrible, hoping you're well, Hagrid. Hagrid rolled up the note, gave it to the owl, which clamped it in its beak, went to the door, and he threw the owl out into the storm. Then he came back and sat down as though this was as normal as talking on the telephone. Harry realized his mouth was open and closed it quickly. "Where was I?" said Hagrid. But at that moment, Uncle Vernon, still ashen-faced, was looking very angry, and he moved into the firelight. "He's not going," he said. Hagrid grunted. "I'd like to see a great muggle like you stop him," he said. "A what?" said Harry, interested. "A muggle," said Hagrid. "That's what we call non-magic folk like them. And it's your bad luck you grew up in a family of the biggest muggles I ever laid eyes on." "We swore when we took him in we'd put a stop to this rubbish," said Uncle Vernon. "Swore we'd stamp it out of him. Wizard indeed." "You knew?" said Harry. "You knew that I'm a wizard?" "Knew?" shrieked Aunt Petunia suddenly. "Knew? Of course we knew. How could you not be, my dratted sister being what she was? Oh, she got a letter just like that and disappeared off to that school and came home every vacation with her pockets full of frog spawn and turning teacups into rats. I was the only one who saw her for what she was. A freak. But for my mother and father, oh no, it was Lily this and Lily that. They were proud of having a witch in the family." Something did stop sorry, it was an important text. She stopped to draw a deep breath and then went ranting on. It seemed she'd been waiting to say some of this for years. "Then she met that Potter at school, and they left and got married and had you. And of course, I knew you'd be just the same, just as strange, just as abnormal. And then, if you please, she went and got herself blown up, and we got landed with you." Harry had gone white. As soon as he found his voice, he said, Blown up? You said they died in a car crash. Car crash? Roared Hagrid, jumping up so angrily that the Dursleys scuttled back to the corner. How could a car crash kill Lily and James Potter? It's an outrage! A scandal! Harry Potter not knowing his own story when every kid in the world knows his name. But why? What happened? Harry asked urgently. The anger faded from Hagrid's face. He looked suddenly anxious. I never expected this, he said in a low, worried voice. I had no idea. When Dumbledore told me there might be some trouble getting a hold of you and how much you didn't know. Harry, I don't know if I'm the right person to tell you, but someone's gotta. You can't go off to Hogwarts not knowing. He threw the Dursleys a dirty look. Well, it's best you know as much as I can tell you. Mind, I can't tell you everything. It's a great mystery, parts of it. He sat down and stared into the fire for a few seconds, and then said, It begins, I suppose, with a person called... But it's incredible you don't know his name. Everybody in the world knows. Who? Well, I don't like saying the name if I can help it. No one does. Why not? Galloping gargoyles, Harry. People are still scared. Blimey, this is difficult. See, there was this wizard who went bad. As bad as you could go. Worse than worse. His name was... Hagrid gulped, but no words came out. Could you write it down? Harry suggested. Nah, I can't spell it. All right. Voldemort. Hagrid shuddered. Ugh, don't make me say it again. Anyway, this wizard, about 20 years ago now, started looking for followers. Got 'em, too. Some were afraid, some just wanted a bit of his power, 'cause he kept getting himself power all right. Dark days, Harry. Didn't know who to trust, didn't dare get friendly with strange wizards or witches. Terrible things happened. He was taking over. Of course, some stood up to him, and he killed them. Horribly. One of the safest places left was Hogwarts. Reckon Dumbledore's the only one you know who was afraid of. Didn't dare try taking the school, not just then anyway. Now, your mom and dad were as good a witch and wizard as I ever knew. Head boy and girl at Hogwarts in their day. Suppose the mystery is why you-know-who never tried to get him on his side before. Probably knew they were too close to Dumbledore to want anything to do with the dark side. Maybe he thought he could persuade him. Maybe he just wanted him out of the way. All anyone knows is he turned up in the village where you were living on Halloween 10 years ago. You were just a year old. He came to your house and... Hagrid suddenly pulled out a very dirty, spotted handkerchief and blew his nose with the sound of a foghorn. I'm sorry, he said. But it's that sad. Knew your mom and dad. No nicer people. You couldn't find nicer people anywhere. You know who killed him. And then, and this is the real mystery of the thing, he tried to kill you too. Wanted to make a clean job of it, I suppose. Or maybe he just liked killing by then. But he couldn't do it. Never wonder how you got that mark on your forehead? That's no ordinary cut. That's what you get when a powerful, evil curse touches you. Took care of your mom and dad, and your house even, but it didn't work on you. And that's why you're famous, Harry. No one's ever lived after he decided to kill him. No one except you. And he's killed some of the best witches and wizards of the age. The McKinyons, the Bones, the Pruitts, and you were only a baby, and you lived. Something very painful was going on in Harry's mind. As Hagrid's story came to a close, he saw another blinding flash of green light, more clearly than he'd ever remembered it before, and he remembered something else, for the first time in his life. A high, cruel laugh. Hagrid was watching him sadly. Took you from that ruined house myself, on Dumbledore's orders. Brought you here to this lot. Psh, load of old tosh, said Uncle Vernon. Harry jumped. He had almost forgotten that the Dursleys were there. Uncle Vernon certainly seemed to have gotten back his courage. He was glaring at Hagrid. His fists were clenched. "Now you listen here, boy," he snarled. "I accept that something's strange about you. Probably nothing a good beating wouldn't have cured. And if all this about your parents, well, they were weirdos, no one denying it, and the world's better off without them, in my opinion. They asked for what they got, getting mixed up with these wizarding types. Just what I expected. Always knew they'd come up to a sticky end." At that moment, Hagrid leapt from the sofa and drew a battered pink umbrella from inside his coat. Pointing this at Uncle Vernon like a sword, he said, "I'm warning you, Dursley. I'm warning you. One more word." The danger of being speared at the end of the umbrella by a bearded giant, Uncle Vernon's courage failed again. He flattened himself against the wall and fell silent. "That's better," said Hagrid, breathing heavily and sitting back down on the sofa, which this time sagged right down to the floor. Harry, meanwhile, still had some questions to ask. Hundreds of them. "But what happened to Sorry, you know who." "Good question, Harry. He disappeared. Vanished. Same night he tried to kill you. Makes you even more famous. That's the biggest mystery, you see. He was getting more and more powerful. Why'd he go? Some say he died. Codswallop, in my opinion. Dunno if he even had enough human left in him to die. Some say he's still out there, biding his time but I don't believe it. People who was on his side came back to ours. Some of them came out of kind of a trance. Don't reckon they could have done it if he was coming back. Most of us reckon he's still out there somewhere, but lost his powers. Too weak to carry on. 'Cause something about you finished him, Harry. There was something going on that night that he hadn't counted on. I dunno what it was. Nobody knows. But something about you stumped him. Hagrid looked at Harry with warmth and respect blazing in his eyes. But Harry, instead of feeling pleased and proud, felt quite sure that this had been a horrible mistake. A wizard? Him? How could he possibly be? He spent his life being clouded by Dudley and bullied by Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon. If he was really a wizard, why hadn't they been turned into warty toads every time they tried to lock him in the cupboard? If he'd once defeated the greatest sorcerer in the world, how come Dudley had always been able to kick him around like a football? "Hagrid," he said quietly, "I think you might have made a mistake. I don't think I can be a wizard." To his surprise, Hagrid chuckled. "Not a wizard, eh? Never made things happen when you were angry or scared?" Harry looked into the fire. Now he came to think about it. Every odd thing that had ever made his aunt and uncle furious with him had happened when he, Harry, had been angry or upset or chased by Dudley's gang, and he somehow found himself out of reach. Dreading going to school with that ridiculous haircut, he'd managed to make it grow back. And the very last time Dudley had hit him, hadn't he gotten his revenge without even realizing he was doing it? Hadn't he set a boa constrictor on him? Harry looked at Hagrid smiling, and saw that Hagrid was positively beaming at him. "See," said Hagrid. "Harry Potter, not a wizard. You wait. You'll be right famous at Hogwarts." Uncle Vernon wasn't going to give in without a fight. "Haven't I told you he's not going?" he hissed. "He's going to Stonewall High, and he'll be perfectly grateful for it. I've read those letters, and he needs all sorts of rubbish, spell books, wands, and... If he wants to go, a great muggle like you won't stop him," growled Hagrid. "Stop Lily and James Potter's son from going to Hogwarts. You're mad. His name's been down ever since he was born. He's off to the finest school of witchcraft and wizardry in the world. 7 years there, and he won't know himself. He'll be with youngsters of his own sort for a change, and he'll be under the greatest headmaster of all, Albus Dumbledore. I'll not be paying for some crackpot old fool to teach him magic tricks," yelled Uncle Vernon. But he had... Whoop! I dropped you guys. I'm so sorry. I got a little excited. All right. That's better. But he had finally gone too far. Hagrid seized his umbrella and whirled it over his head. "Never," he thundered, "insult Albus Dumbledore in front of me." He brought the umbrella swishing down through the air to point it at Dudley. And there was a flash of violet light, a sound of a firecracker, a sharp squeal, and the next second Dudley was dancing on the spot with his hands clapped over his fat bottom, howling in pain. When he turned his back on them, Harry saw a curly pig's tail poking through the hole in his trousers. Yes, I dropped my phone. Sorry, Tom. Uncle Vernon roared. Pulling Aunt Petunia and Dudley into the other room, he cast one last terrified look at Hagrid and slammed the door behind him. Hagrid looked down at his umbrella and stroked his beard. "Shouldn't have lost my temper," he said ruefully. "But it didn't work anyway. I meant to turn him into a pig, but I suppose he was so much like a pig anyway that there wasn't much left to do." He cast a sideways look at Harry under his bushy eyebrows. "Be grateful if you don't mention this to anyone at Hogwarts," he said. "I'm not supposed to do magic, strictly speaking. I was allowed to do a bit to follow you here and, get your letter and stuff. One of the reasons I was so keen to take the job." "Why aren't you supposed to do magic?" asked Harry. "Oh, well, I was at Hogwarts myself and I got expelled, to tell you the truth. In me 3rd year. They snapped me wand in half and everything. But Dumbledore let me stay on as gamekeeper. Great man, Dumbledore." "Why were you expelled?" It's getting late and we've got lots to do tomorrow," said Hagrid loudly. "Gotta get you up to town, get your books and all that." He took off his thick black coat and threw it to Harry. "You can kip under that," he said. "Don't mind if it wiggles a bit. I think I got a couple of dormice in one of the pockets." That was the end of chapter 4. Do I need to go on to chapter 5 or are we going to call that a night? I've got 4 people watching. Oh. So, do I need to read chapter 5 or I can read that one tomorrow night? Nobody's answering me. You guys are all so quiet. Oh, now we're down to 3 people. Okay, do chapter 5 tomorrow. Good. Can you hear that I'm starting to lose my voice? I'm not used to talking this much. Okay. Drink all you want. Here's all the hand gestures. I don't know. All right. I will read chapter 5 tomorrow. That is Diagon Alley. Thank you guys for watching again. I'm sorry I dropped the phone. This is actually a lot of fun. I'm quite enjoying doing it. All right. Bye, guys. Angie, call me. I do need a shot of whiskey. Let's go have a drink. I do not have the